Okay. So next to last class, which is sad. I also noticed my notes are not very long for today. And for whatever reason, I don't have any Trump notes. So we'll talk about Trump next time. How did I leave Trump off the notes? I know the answer. It's not, I'm not offended by Trump. You know, the tweets maybe some days, but I don't dislike Trump. That's not why I left him off. I know why I left him off. It's just the, excuse me, new edition of the book. The older edition didn't have. Sorry for the giant yawn. I'm so sorry. The older edition didn't have Trump in it. That's why I left him off. So it wasn't anything politically motivated, I promise. All right, let's look at weekly questions and talk about those for a minute or two. All right, here we go. Weekly questions. Somebody asked me last class, didn't you make a video about the first weekly question? Yes, I did. And I'll resend the link to that because apparently that was long enough ago that you've lost the link or, well, you know, it's not due till Friday. So it's like, yeah, I don't care. But now you do. Okay, so Reagan, be sure and talk about foreign and domestic policy, and don't forget that third part of the question. Specific examples always make for more points. George W. Bush, same deal here. I've read a few of these because a few of you have turned them in early. And the issue with the ones I've read seemed to be that you only talk about things that happened after he said this. So, which is not the end of the world. But, you know, when he's saying that we had gone out in the world to protect and not possess, he really is talking past tense. So stuff that happened before his presidency. So consider putting in a thing or two that wasn't during the Bush administration. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Oh, dear. And third question, the issue that I've seen, a few of you have turned this in, is that you're not talking about their campaigns, you're talking about their presidency. So, oh, sorry, talk about what they promised when they ran for office. Talk about what changes they promised, because both of these guys are seen as agents of change, either hope and change or draining the swamp, and their use of technology, who it is they tried to get to vote for them, and how they tried to get them to vote for them. And I think we'll talk about the influence of money on campaigns next time as well, in the Trump administration. I'm not talking specifically about Trump. He actually uses less money than his opponents, as well, at least in his 2 election campaigns he did. So these things are all due Friday, midnight. If you turn them in sooner, it makes me happier. If you have already turned them in and I gave you feedback and you didn't like the number of points you got, you can still resubmit them. But I mean, that's not gonna be true forever. So like if you submit them on Thursday, there's not a great chance that I'll get them back to you Thursday night, and then you can resubmit them on Friday. So if you wanted that, hey, I turned my stuff in early, will you look at it kind of benefit, I really need it by tonight or tomorrow. But of course, it's not due until Friday at midnight. And hopefully the quiz will show up tonight at midnight, hopefully. If you start to take it or you go to take it and it's not there, please send me an email that says, hey, Serna, the quiz isn't there. But I think I've finally, after 2 semesters of doing this online, I've finally figured out how to set it to where it shows up at the right time, I think, maybe. I don't know. All right. I think also as far as grades go, that I've graded pretty much everything you've turned in. If you have turned in something and it hasn't been graded, feel free to let me know. Honestly, you know, we're almost out of time, so like get your act together, grade my thing, because I may have overlooked it. And what else do I want to tell you? Oh, somebody emailed me. It made me laugh. I'm sorry, but somebody emailed me. It's like, I don't know how to check my grades. Where are my grades? It's like, well, does it matter at this point? Because, you know, the semester's almost over and you don't know what your grade is. But you know, my Blackboard site, my view looks different than yours. So on the left side of mine, I just have a thing that says grades. So I click on that. It's not a huge mystery. I think you might have to click on a part that says tools and then look at your grades, but I don't know. I really don't know. But, you know, if you have grade questions other than how do I find my grades, it's like, I don't know. I really don't. Excuse me for doing this. I'm so sorry. Goodness. I decided it would be a really good idea to rake leaves this weekend. And you know what? It was not, for a variety of reasons, shoulder surgery and allergies. So, goodness, when you get older, the allergies are the same. The shoulder is not. All right. Do you guys, let me think, is there anything else we need to talk about? Oh, yeah. People keep asking me, like, how do I know what my average is? It's like, I don't know. I do know. So you need 210 points to get a C. You need 240 to get a B. You need 270 plus a book review. Any number of points at all on the book review to get an A. And right now you have 70 points left. You have 3 weekly questions, so those are 10 points each, and 40 questions on the quiz, which will show up on Wednesday, hopefully. So subtract the number of points you currently have from the number of points you would like to have, you know, 210, 240, 270, and that'll tell you how many you need out of the remaining 70 to get what you want. Also, your grades don't go in directly from Blackboard. I put them into a separate program, and I just put in A, B, C, D, or F. So I don't put in a number or anything like that. So if I think you have 285 points, but you think you have 286 points, honestly, I mean, I'll go back and add that point if it makes you happy. But honestly, it doesn't matter because you're getting an A, which is cool. Yeah, if you did the book, of course, if you're getting an A. But there are times that it does matter. So if you're concerned about your grade, let me know, and I'll do my best to figure out what's going on. And if I need to fix something, I will. But you know, now's the time for you to tell me, because like next Wednesday will be too late. Next Tuesday, maybe still. But yeah, I need to have my grades done on Tuesday. So, which is also why, last thing about grades, please turn in your stuff on time. Please get your stuff in by Friday at midnight. If it's like 12:05, that's fine. I can live with that. But if it's Tuesday at midnight, that's not cool. And I know I wrote the syllabus. I know that it says you can turn in some stuff late. I'm just telling you, now is not the time. You've had all semester to turn stuff in late, and you're only supposed to turn in 2 things late. And most of you who are late people have already turned in at least 2 things late. You know what I'm saying? All right. I'm going to sneeze again. Excuse me, or cough. All right, let's look at the notes and talk about whatever we're going to talk about today. Bush, Gore, whoever else. Obama, maybe Trump. Tomorrow or Thursday is Trump Day. We're having Trump Day. Who knew? You'd have a Trump Day in class. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm going to try not to cry, sneeze, make any more weird noises, but I cannot promise you anything. Okay. I don't know what is in the air. It is driving me crazy. Okay. I'm in 2000. You may remember 2000. Probably not. I don't know. Maybe. George W. Bush, who was our Bush, he had been governor of Texas, and Al Gore, who was not Al Gore, he was from Tennessee. He had been Bill Clinton's vice president, perhaps you remember him. Ran for president, and it was close. How close was it? The closest election in U.S. history by popular vote. So it all came down to Florida, which made it a little easier to decide, but probably more, I don't know, easier to decide in some ways than the current, like, oh my gosh, is there election fraud sort of question. Although I guess harder in some ways. I guess the way that it was easier to decide is really just one state. You didn't have to look at 8 different states and is there a mess in Georgia? Is there a mess in California? Oh my gosh, whose music is that? It's too loud. Mute yourself, mute. I'm looking, I just don't see who it is. Oh, that's okay. Let me see if I can mute Kennedy on this end. Okay, Kennedy is muted. Kennedy, you're muted. Oh my goodness. That was way more entertaining than me though, wasn't it? To be, to be fair. It was. I get it. I get it. Okay. Sorry, now I'm trying to make my screen go back to the way it was, and I can't. Oh well. It's okay. It's not even the strangest thing that's happened this semester, is it? We'll say that was the presidential election, maybe. I don't know. What was I talking about between sneezes? Sorry. Oh, closest election in history, Florida. So one state, and they used paper ballots. We didn't have so many electronic voting machines in, probably none in 2000. I don't remember, to be honest. But there were a couple of counties in Florida, and they kept counting and recounting some of the votes, and it was kind of a mess. I think the first lawsuit was filed by the Gore team, and then the Bush team, and then the Gore team, so back and forth in state court. It very quickly, in the scheme of things, it took about a month, but very quickly moved into the federal court, appeals court, and then to the Supreme Court, who decided that the recounts needed to stop, that the most current recount was the one they were going to take, and that was the one that said that Bush was ahead and should be president. And Bush needed to win Florida to win the presidency, and I think the margin of victory was fewer than 5,000 votes, which is, it was small. It's like less than 0.5%. So, yeah, it was close. And it was a highly disputed election. And people said that Bush was selected, not elected, and we were distressed. We were, and it was upsetting to people. And we didn't think we'd be unified ever again as a country. And then 9/11, which changed how we saw the world. So we will talk about 9/11. I'm sorry, I'm messing with my screen because the who's here box is right in the middle of my notes or on the side. Can you see that? I don't know. Now it's on the side. Okay. Stuff about Bush. When Bush becomes president, the economy is a little stinky. So he thinks, I'll do a Reagan kind of thing. I will cut taxes, because if you cut taxes, then people will have more of their own money to spend, and entrepreneurs will increase the size of their business and hire employees, and it'll be better for everyone. It's that supply side, or Reaganomics, or trickle down economics, depending on what you like to call it. So Bush thought he would try that. Biggest tax cut in American history, and then 9/11. So the economy is not going to improve very quickly, in part because we were in a recession, in part, sorry for the yawn, because of 9/11, and it caused some temporary slowdowns and shutdowns in the economy. And then there's going to be a housing bubble, which we will talk about in a minute, or 5 or 10. Other stuff that we want to talk about, the Bush doctrine. Okay, so after 9/11, I just assume that what happened on 9/11, but that may or may not be a fair thing to assume. So on 9/11, there were 4 commercial plane flights that were hijacked by a group of folks primarily from Saudi Arabia, who were in the United States, sometimes under student visas, but under other visas. I think most of them had gone to a flight school to learn some very basic things about flying a plane. And Their mission was to hijack these planes and to fly them into the World Trade Center, the White House, and the Pentagon. And they were 2 out of 3 on that. The one that didn't make it was to the White House. And that's where the group of passengers was able to figure out what was going on because they heard the news, not heard it, but saw it on their phones or got it in some other electronic communication, what had happened on the other plane. So they hijacked the plane from the hijackers and crashed it into the ground so that it wouldn't hit the White House, which was like weirdly heroic and tragic and sad and it's a lot of stuff all at once. So the response was, I don't know, the country is fairly unified. We certainly weren't upset about the election anymore. The concern was, will this happen again? Is it going to happen all over the country? I mean, those were kind of the immediate concerns. Who did this? Why would they do it? And we end up concluding that it's a group, Al-Qaeda, led by a fellow named Osama bin Laden, who had really not been talked about too much on the international stage, you know, general news sort of thing. I don't mean that he wasn't well known in foreign policy circles or espionage circles. People certainly, you know, behind the scenes were talking about him. And really an anti-American campaign. And the book has kind of talked about how there's really a concern about the United States in this era, really starting in the 60s, because of a very vocal support of Israel, and that's certainly part of it, and intervention within that region, primarily to control oil sources, perhaps. I mean, that's certainly a big part of it. And after 9/11, what the president decides and Congress is that we would declare a war on terrorism rather than have a declared war on, we're certainly not going to declare war on Saudi Arabia for a variety of reasons, political, economic mostly. But Afghanistan and Iraq, because they are the homes of terrorist groups, and they're supporting these groups, allowing them to grow. So we will send troops into Afghanistan and Iraq, not because these countries are overt sponsors of terror, but they're allowing the growth of these terror organizations. That's our position. So we will send troops into Afghanistan and Iraq. And we'll do this under the idea of the Bush Doctrine. It's a declaration of preemptive war. So before there's an overt declaration of war by someone or an overt attack, although I understand that 9/11 was an attack, this gives the United States, I don't know that permission's the right word, but we'll use this idea to legitimize the sending of troops to these nations. So preemptive war is legitimate. So it's the idea that you need to stop any future attacks rather than waiting for another several thousand civilians to be killed. So the government is fairly unified on this. The American public is fairly unified on this as well at the time. Over time, because it's been almost 20 years at this point, over time, certainly support for having troops in that area has changed, but you know, and the book will compare, Foner will compare this to our situation with Vietnam, and in some ways it is pretty comparable, in other ways not so much. We definitely didn't send as many troops, but we have been there a very long time as well. So preemptive war doctrine, that's the Bush doctrine, so I'd be vaguely familiar with that. And then the Patriot Act, and I had mentioned last time that Patriot's an acronym for something, and I couldn't remember what it was, so I put it in my version of the notes, which I know isn't the same as your version of the notes, so the parentheses part is added. So Patriot Act is passed, and it stands for, it's USA Patriot Act, uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. So it allows law enforcement agencies to wiretap and spy on citizens without their knowledge. So it's almost like a suspension of part of the Fourth Amendment. So um, there can be warrantless searches, or they can get warrants from non-public or secret FISA courts. Oh, sorry, excuse me. So, you don't know the charges against you, you don't know who's brought the charges, and typically they're investigating or um, searching for items because of things they've heard or read on your media accounts. So it might be keywords that come up. I think in the beginning of the use of the Patriot Act, that their keyword searches were pretty broad, and I think they've probably become more specific. But I do know that, I don't know, I know I've read that they record and down and save conversations, and that they've got a lot of information stored. And the Patriot Act has been renewed 2 or 3 times at this point. And if you look on the Department of Justice website, it does explain the Patriot Act. That's where I got the definition, and also explains your misunderstandings about the Patriot Act, which I thought was kind of interesting that they had that. People thought this was a necessity, and some still do, of course. I think they do record phone calls as well. So somewhere there's a big record of me calling my dad and saying, no, Dad, I'm sure you don't have COVID just because you can't smell and taste anything. I think I did have that conversation. I know I did have that conversation with my dad. It's like, I think I have a really bad cold, and Sandy does too. It's my stepmom, because we can't smell or taste anything. I went, yeah, I've heard there's a really bad cold going around, Dad. So it's like, wait, no. But I think my dad's position is he's old. Nothing's going to take him out. Or if it is, it was meant to be. Old people. All right, back to business. I apologize. But yeah, they record phone calls and stuff. Oh, goodness. And some people think that's invasive and intrusive, and other people think, well, it's just the price in the modern era, and nothing's secret anyway. And if I say I wish I had a pizza, and then a pizza ad shows up on my phone, I know Google's listening to me anyway, so why not the government too? So I know people have varying views on that. And, currently courts are more supportive than less of these sorts of laws, okay? But there's an increasing emphasis on Homeland Security. You might remember that they created the Homeland Security Administration and the Transportation Safety, TSA Administration, who are always my favorite people. No offense if you work for them, but no, I was talking to a friend yesterday. He goes like, are you going to travel anywhere for Christmas? It's like, maybe, maybe not. He goes, I'm impressed that you're the only person I've ever met that gets searched every time you fly. I am. I'm the only person I've ever met that gets searched every time I fly. I flew one time this past year with I have really young nephew, teenage nephew, and he'd never flown before. So it was his first flight, and he just kind of sails through, and they stop me, and they search all my stuff, and they search me, and I get the extra pat down. He just looked at me, and I went, I don't know. I can't explain it, but every time I fly, I get the extra search, the extra pat down, and they search my luggage, both the carry-on and on the plane. So I don't know what I did, but those agencies are created during this time period, I think primarily just to search me, but I know also to be serious, of course, to make travel safer. And certainly other countries, I think Israel is probably the most notable about this. They make you go turn in your luggage like the day before, and they search through all of it, and they're not even playing with you. It's like, yeah, we're searching your stuff. Yeah, we're searching you. And certainly since 9/11, we had, people have explosives in their shoes, which is why your shoes get searched, and, small containers of things in their carry-on luggage, which is why they search, yeah. So they search all kinds of stuff now because people have tried stuff. So I do recognize it's legitimate and it's not just about me, although maybe. Um, so there's a stronger emphasis on homeland security, which is also why it was particularly distressing when Hurricane Katrina happened and we were supposed to be prepared to protect the homeland, and we did not do well with the hurricane. And I know it's possible some of you may have lived in Louisiana during that time period because a lot of people left and didn't go back. But, they had to evacuate a lot of folks afterwards and not before. And there's a lot of blame if you study that. I haven't studied it very intensely, but, just read casually about it. Certainly the local mayor did not do a good job. The state, so the governor did not coordinate with the local mayor of New Orleans, and the federal government wasn't proactive at all in this either. So this was a very bad situation where thousands of people died and billions of dollars of damage happened. You can't really stop the damage from the hurricanes, but you can evacuate people so that they're not stranded on the rooftops or stranded in the Superdome, or that wealthy people get out and poor people get stuck behind, or people stuck in hospitals and nursing homes. It was incredibly tragic. I mean, there's just no way around it. It was very, very sad. It was. So, and embarrassing on the political side as well. All right, I gotta turn my phone over because people keep texting me and it seems to be distracting me, so apologies. All right, it's probably my dad telling me about his cold. Yeah, goodness. All right, no, I have a nephew who has COVID, which is why I'm pretty sure my dad has COVID. It's like, yeah, Jeffrey's got that cold as well. Goodness. But my dad's almost 80, so won't be a problem, right? Goodness. It's hard, you think it's hard when your kids are young. When your parents are old, my goodness, you cannot keep those people in line. Senior citizens, they're like little kids with driver's licenses. Yeah. Hopefully my dad doesn't have the address to the YouTube channel. He's watching this. He's like, I cannot, yeah, he'll post a rebuttal video. Okay, back to business. My dad would have favored, I don't know. I'll have to ask my dad if he thought the Patriot Act was okay. He honestly probably thought it went a little too far. He's a fairly moderate Republican. Okay, back to business. Okay. After 9/11, the economy was bad. It was also bad before 9/11. So 9/11 did not improve the economy. Now, part of the reason that planes were sent to the World Trade Center, I mean, part of that's symbolic, but part of it was a thought that it would bring down the U.S. economy. And the U.S. economy was already in recession, so it didn't help, but it didn't, cause the collapse that perhaps people anticipated. One of the things that was a problem for us during the time period, leftover parts of the banking crisis, led to the housing bubble. And the book does a really good job of talking about how a lot of this is the Congress repealing parts of the Glass-Steagall Act, some restrictions on the banking industry and how loans were made. And then there's a big push, the idea that everyone should be able to achieve the American dream. And if you're wondering, like, what is the American dream? Previous generations, the American dream was buying a house. So the thought was if everyone owned a house, they would be more stable. They would have more buy-in to whatever they needed to have more buy-in to. So they really decreased the requirements for home loans. And I remember this because this might have been fairly close to the time where my husband and I were buying a house. And I was a teacher, taught high school, and my husband, this was before, at the end of his life, he was a high school teacher. Like the last 6 years, he taught Spanish. But before that, he had worked at an automotive paint and body shop supply warehouse. So he mixed paint and sold Bondo and stuff like that. And we made about the same amount of money. And, back then that wasn't very much money. So between the two of us, maybe between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. And so when we went to get a home loan, they said we could get a home loan of $300,000. And we just looked at each other like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, why in the world would the bank offer us $300,000? And that was during this era because they were trying to get people to buy houses. And they, we just looked at them and went, that's dumb. And, we bought a house that was substantially, well, it was $100,000, which was a little bit of a stretch for us in those days. And, some of you are like, you cannot buy a house for, I know I'm old. It was a long time ago. I told you this. But we had a lot of friends who went to similar banks and they said, hey, $300,000. And they went, cool. And they bought the $300,000 house. And guess what they didn't keep for very long? Yes, the $300,000 house, because that's a ridiculous loan amount for that amount of income. But what I'm saying is they had decreased the loan standards so much that people were receiving the opportunity to take these loans, and they would structure the payments in a way where, like, the first 5 years you could afford the payments, and then there'd be a big balloon payment to kind of make up for that first 5 years. And it was people lost their houses within 5 years in very large numbers. So that was an enormous problem for the economy, mixed in with the other effects of the banking crisis. So it was a bad time. It was a really bad time for the housing industry. Dang it. One of you's making noise again. Oh, it's somebody's kid, though. We don't want to get mad at the kid, do we? No, we don't want to get mad at the kid. Let me look and see. The kid sounds really cute, though, don't they?
Hey, I'm in class. I'm sorry. I'm watching my siblings.
No, you're fine. Oh, okay. So you're watching the brother. Okay, very nice. No, they sound cute. So that's good. I'm going to mute you, though, if you're okay with that. Oh, you already muted yourself. Good job. Okay. It's tough. You guys all have a lot of jobs right now, don't you? You're watching the siblings or the kids or, yeah. No, it is tough. Sorry. But good job. Way to be a good brother. Other stuff. So people lost their houses. And I remember that distinctly because my husband and I started the soccer league. And we started the soccer league more for folks that couldn't afford other soccer leagues. And some of our soccer parents that we knew, they couldn't afford soccer. It's like, we know you can't afford the house. And they bought these really big houses and lost them. And it was really hard to see. It was sad. It was tough. And, the banks got bailed out. Some of the builders, the larger builders were okay. The smaller builders were not, but those families were not. They really struggled to recover from those events, and it was a tough time. All right, so economic collapse after 9/11. It's accentuated by 9/11, but certainly not caused by it. And it extends throughout the Obama administration until toward the end, where you start to see a recovery, middle of the second term. Banking crisis, lowered expectations or regulations because of the changes in the Glass-Steagall Act are a big problem. Okay. Obama's election is historic for the obvious reason. He's an African-American president. We haven't had any of those before. Although I would always read these, you read weird history on Facebook. I don't know, you guys are young, so Facebook. But I read the weirdest history on Facebook. And every once in a while I'll comment and say, like, hey, I don't think this is accurate. And then a bunch of people go like, well, who do you think you are? You don't know anything about history. And I go, okay, then. The Facebook meme is correct. There were certainly more Irish slaves in the United States than there were ever African-American slaves. Oh, dear Lord. Or that Obama wasn't the first Black president, and then speculations about who was. And it's like, no. But anyway, I know. People don't go on Facebook to learn history, do they? But Barack Obama, is first African-American president, but not the only historic thing about his election. Use of social media, and that's where you probably want to make comparisons to Trump, and we'll talk about that next time. Use of social media both to campaign and raise money and reach younger voters. And he had a very large number of younger voters who voted for him both times, and he's very popular with younger folks. I think also maybe for my generation, he's kind of our version of the Camelot, the Kennedy family, the Obama family. Young, attractive, intelligent, highly educated, cute kids. You know, it's just like that sweet, ideal family. So, that was, and the way that the Kennedy image was, we know behind the scenes that Kennedy, probably not that great of a husband. Certainly Obama, much better, as far as we know. And we cried. I mean, there aren't as many secrets now, are there? But I think people generally, and I know I live in Texas where that wasn't as true, but I think people generally liked Obama. He's, friendly guy, good family man, worked hard, single mom, all that kind of stuff. So kind of, not necessarily an impoverished guy. He had grandparents that were helpful, but came from, a rougher background, not extremely privileged. And yeah, it was kind of a nice story. So whether you liked him politically or not, most people kind of liked him. I do recognize as well that people said stupid stuff about him. I was telling the last class, probably one of my least my least comfortable ACC class moments was during the 2012 election. So President Obama is elected in 2008. And in 2012, Obama's running against Mitt Romney, who's, generally a respectable guy, good family man, doesn't do stuff, he doesn't swear, he doesn't drink. He's like a super devout religious fellow, nice fellow. Came out in the campaign that like 30 years ago. He might have put his dog in a cage on the top of the car for the road trip, and that probably didn't help him. But it's a weird campaign when they're upset about how you took your dog cross country 30 years ago. But I had a student say, because they had just turned 18, and he said, I don't know if I want to vote for the Kenyan Muslim or the cult member. And I went, oh dear. We don't normally talk about the presidential candidates in class, but I think we're going to today, and I'll help you find some better resources to research the candidates, because if your starting board is Kenyan Muslim versus cult member, you may not be starting at the right place. But people did say that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States, that he wasn't really an American, even though his mom was, right square in the middle of the country from Kansas. I do recognize born in Hawaii. And I think maybe born in Hawaii before it was a state, but it certainly was a territory. And then they're like, there's no birth certificate. And of course, President Trump, who wasn't President Trump then, was pretty loud about that, which interesting. And people said that he was a secret Muslim, although he'd gone to a Church of Christ for most of his adult life, with a fairly controversial pastor, though. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But it was not an Islamic church. And even if it was, I don't know if people know, but there are Muslims in the United States. It's not the most shocking thing ever. Maybe not everybody knows. So if you didn't know, I don't mean to scare you. My goodness. But people did say stupid stuff about Obama. Most people did not, but a few people did, and some of those people were in the media, and certainly they got covered. But I think in general, people liked Obama kind of the same way they liked Bush. Whether you liked what Bush did or not, he's like, that's a nice guy. I think people were kind of the same with Obama. But I could also be wrong, because you don't have to agree with that at all. He did use media really well to raise money and reach new voters, especially young voters. Certainly got people who often voted for Republicans to vote for him, and certainly pushed the idea of change, hope and change. You may even have a poster or a shirt somewhere. A reversal of the Reagan coalition a little bit, because you got some Southerners to vote for him, Midwesterners to vote for him. So people who might have, and not the same people necessarily, I don't mean like, 70-year-old people all voting for Obama, although some did, of course. That same middle class, working class kind of folks saw Obama as an agent of change and hope and that sort of thing, as he advertised. He held traditionally Democratic states as well, and won a couple of Republican states, so he was in. All right. Important accomplishments of the Obama administration. You got to know the most important one is the Affordable Care Act, which is sometimes referred to as Obamacare. Sorry, which I might need at this moment. So, what I get for making fun of not making fun of my dad, but doubting that my dad has a bad cold. But I know mine is allergies from the leaf raking. Obamacare, stuff you need to know about Obamacare. It bans government health insurance agencies, health insurance companies, excuse me, from excluding people because of pre-existing conditions, which to me apparently is allergies today. But you know, that of course was a serious issue. I know I mentioned my husband a lot lately. I don't know what's up with me, but he passed away as a younger person, clearly, and he had many health issues, and it was very hard for him to get health insurance unless he got it through a group at a job, because companies would not accept him with some of the pre-existing conditions he had. So this is really important for people in situations like my husband was in. Also, it says that every person in the United States has to have health insurance, and that's a new thing. And that's one of the things the courts debated, and the Republicans said it's a government takeover of healthcare, which not exactly, because it certainly does still allow you to have private insurance. I know that it does change how private insurance works, but before, people in your age group, younger folks, primarily just didn't buy insurance because you're invincible. You know you are if you're in your teens and 20s and even early 30s. Nothing bad can happen to you. You never get sick. You know how it goes. You don't need to buy insurance. And most of the time, you're right. I mean, most of the time, you are pretty healthy in your 20s. And most people that age didn't buy insurance. And um, the reason that was a problem was the old people, or people like my husband, didn't have the young people to offset the cost. So you weren't in the insurance pool. So insurance for everybody who was more expensive. So if everyone has to buy it, then it's less expensive for everyone in the group. Now it's clearly not less expensive for young folks because the zero is cheaper than cheap insurance. I get that. But it requires everybody to buy insurance. It also creates a tax on certain types of insurance. Like if you have a really good insurance plan at your job, then you might have to pay a little bit of a tax on that as part of your income tax. That wasn't overly popular. And I think they've gotten rid of some of that. I'm trying to think taxes last year, although I don't have like a super great health insurance plan, but I think I did have to pay taxes one year when it first started, and I don't think I do now. The other thing it does, and this is great for people of your generation and unthinkable for people of my generation, kids can stay on their insurance until they're 26. Yeah, my generation is the you're 18, get out and pay for your own stuff generation. So my parents didn't pay for anything after I was 18. So I paid for college and whatever else happened after I was 18. And that was pretty standard. I mean, it was kind of going away. My parents were old school on that. They were broke is what it was. They weren't trying to be mean. They were just broke. And they had 4 kids. What were they thinking? I don't know. That's why they were broke. But in the modern era, you can stay on your parents' insurance till you're 26. So that's a huge bonus. I mean, it is. And parents generally are pretty happy about that. So it does change health insurance and health care, and probably, I mean, the Supreme Court doesn't see it quite the same way Republicans do, and certainly it's been modified several times since then, and you'll probably see it modified in the next administration as well, just a guess. And you started to see a movement toward this kind of thing a little bit, maybe in the Bush administration with the expansion of Medicare for prescriptions. You know, just the idea that government health care plans need to pay for more things, and then the idea that maybe health insurance is more of a human right than a privilege. So we're still kind of debating that, as you know. But Obama administration also restores and renews relations with Cuba, which kind of reversed during the Trump administration, and made an agreement with North Korea to try to persuade them to stop working on nuclear weapons, which certainly the Trump administration had reversed, and then set up, new restrictions. And excuse me for the yawn. I'm cynical enough to think that North Korea is probably going to do whatever they want to do, no matter what the deal is. But you still got to try. So I get it why we were in the agreement, and I get why Trump thought that the agreement wasn't working. The economy does improve, but the weird thing about the economy, and you got to remember this, is that we don't really replace the jobs that we lost. So the new jobs that come up are lower paying jobs. And so a lot of times you have to take a couple jobs to make up for the one job you lost. And we're still kind of in that odd sort of gig economy where you may not have a full-time job that meets all your needs, but you've got a collection of part-time jobs. I guess I'm kind of part of that as well. So it is a different situation. And if you had a full-time job, especially if it was a salaried job, your workload probably increased pretty dramatically. I noticed that as a teacher, but it's probably for a variety of reasons. Class sizes got bigger and stuff. Yeah, we could talk about that sometime, but that's not why we're here today. So the economy improves, but unemployment remains higher than expected through the recovery, which is why people thought maybe Obama would have trouble getting reelected. But I think his personal popularity plus the slight improvement in the economy took him to a second term. So, but it is unusual when the economy is bad for someone to get reelected. And the economy was still a little iffy then. Now you do see more improvement, and you've seen people talk about whether this the current economy, I know not COVID related, but pre-COVID related, where you saw the big increases, was that because of what Obama had put in place, the administration had put in place a few years before, or was this Trump's leadership? And the answer is probably yes. It might be some of both. But one person doesn't necessarily change the economy, but their policies can. I get that. And sometimes time, there really is a business cycle, I think. But all right, back to more business. Random changes that the book will note in the modern era. Pay gap between men and women decreases slightly, but continues. What you see change in larger numbers is women going to college. Now more women go to college than men. What you don't see change is what industries women go into. Still not as many women entering STEM fields. So you don't have as many science, technology, engineering, and mechanical, I think it is. So not as many women going into computer science or engineering. So if you've been in a public school recently, you see clubs for girls, women in science and education, trying to push them more towards those jobs. And tech companies trying very hard to recruit women to work for their companies because the numbers are smaller. And some people would argue that that's part of the reason there's a pay gap, because women don't go into the jobs where they get paid as much. And others would argue it's because, if the kids are sick, the women are going to stay home with them, or the older brother. Good job, by the way, on that older brother, hanging out with the kids. Or sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed, but women have babies and men don't. So when you go on maternity leave, that's pretty much always the woman. Yeah, so you might have to temporarily leave the workforce to give birth to the kid and hang out with them for a little while until, you feel comfortable. Leaving them at daycare, or, nowadays just working from home with them, I suppose. Complicated stuff though. But pay gap decreases. There are laws. Lilly Ledbetter Equal Pay Act is passed during the Obama administration that help a little bit as well. But there may be some other issues involved here. Manufacturing jobs also will continue to leave the United States. I don't know if you want to blame NAFTA along with, who's that guy, Ross Perot, but it probably has to do with being able to make stuff cheaper in other countries. consumers tend to want to buy the cheapest version of whatever it is they want. So it's why we shop at Walmart or Target or Walmart. And healthcare and service jobs become kind of the prominent things in the United States. And I think education jobs are on the rise again as well. They will be after this pandemic thing, because all the 60-year-old teachers they're about done. So healthcare and service jobs become more prominent in the United States, and certainly, tech and engineering jobs are good growth areas as well. Segregation continues to be a problem during this era, and it's really more because of economic issues. I mean, there are not real estate agents who go like, hey, because you're Black, I'm not showing you these houses. The real estate agents will say, because your income level is this, I'm not showing you the $500,000 houses. So segregation has become a socioeconomic issue, but if you look at all the statistics, as a rule, people of color are poorer than people who are white. And there's all sorts of statistics that show the intersection between poverty and race. And that's a tough combo. It's part of why the Supreme Court has ruled that government-assisted housing can't just be in poor areas, because it's not just the neighborhood, now it's the school, because property taxes pay for schools, so higher income areas tend to have better schools with more opportunities. So if poor kids always go to school in poorer communities, they're going to have fewer resources, and it's going to be hard for them to be anything but poor. So, and I am not saying, please, 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 I am not saying that if you grew up poor, that there's no way for you to not be poor and there's no way out of that. I'm just saying, what statistics bear out, that generational poverty is a harder thing to escape. It just is, because having that assist on the way up, and that's part of the reason too, I was joking about the insurance, the health insurance until you're 26. That's part of the reason stuff like that matters. It gives you a little bit more of a safety net as you're getting to be an adult, to help you kind of get on your feet. And if your parents are poor, there's not much of a safety net for you to get on your feet. Sometimes you are helping provide a safety net for them. I know, there were times in college, I was able to go to college because I had scholarships. And I had scholarships for undergrad and graduate school, which is kind of a weird thing. But I know that there were times that I had to work because, you have to help. Well, I didn't necessarily have to have health insurance, but car insurance and stuff like that. But there were times I sent money home, while I was in college. And I think, people who go like, you can get a student loan. You can get a student loan if you can pay it back or if your parents co-sign for it. But if you're poor, it's not just that you can't afford college, it's that there are other things you can't afford as well, like if your parents need some of your paycheck. So, that's a whole different thing, that is. And segregation it's a pervasive issue in the modern era, and still is. And you see, like, there's always a discussion going on about this in a major city like Austin, about gentrification, where a formerly affordable neighborhood that might have been primarily Black or Hispanic, people start building condos there. It makes the housing values go up. And even if you're living in your parents' house and that's their house because it was the grandparents' house, so it's clearly paid off, now your annual taxes go up so much that you can't afford to stay there. So, it has, the modern era, we have strange socioeconomic issues which turn into segregation. And I would always tell my high school students, like, it's clear you don't want me to live where I teach. And they go, well, that's not true. We want you to live here. And I go, like, I just drove by your neighborhood and it said houses start at 500,000. That's not where teachers live. It's just not. Okay. Political divisions remain. You know this, dude. I have to tell you, you just turn on the TV and see this. And the other part, I didn't have to tell you this either. Winning primary elections typically requires you to be more extreme. And then when you go back to the general election, because more people vote in that, the people who aren't as excited about being a Democrat or Republican, it's like, I got to pick somebody. They probably didn't vote in the primary election, so they're not going to want you to be like crazy right or crazy left. So it makes really for strange issues for politicians like, I don't know, say Joe Biden promises that he's going to have the most liberal administration in the history of the United States. And Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez might be down with that, but maybe the average Democrat in Pennsylvania isn't. So it's tricky. It's a tricky line to walk. All right, I'm going to stop talking about the notes and point out to you that sadly there are no Trump notes for today, but we will talk about Trump and the weekly questions next time. Okay, so before we go, don't go just yet because I want to double check on the attendance. But before we go, do you guys have